So, welcome to part 2. I did have to cut the last video short just because it was getting ridiculously long. But we're going to take a look at the lower today. It's very straightforward. We're not going to go too far down the rabbit hole. We can pull the buffer spring system and the buffer out. Just a normal spring style buffer. A spring, it does springy stuff. And what we're going to do, I feel terrible here because it's a lovely FDE colour. And I'm going to get it covered in like grease marks because of how much grease was on this thing. So I'm not entirely sure how this thing comes apart, so we're going to find out together. I imagine we're going to have to pull the mag release out as normal, so we can just rotate that out whilst trying not to scratch the receiver. Once we get it out so far, we should be able to spin the button from the other side. There we go. Like that. That drops out, button drops out, there's the spring. We've got a screw on the back, but they've thankfully done it with an Allen key screw instead of a posi, which they round off straight away in the MWS and the Noveskis. So we've got a little cap head metric 2.5mm screw. We're going to have to remove the selector. How are we doing that? Is it a pin? I think it is. Yeah, I think it's a pin. So what we'll do, we'll get a pin punch. Again, you don't have to do this. I'm just doing it for you guys so you don't have to. Now, it's going to be a little bit difficult to do this and record it on camera, so I'm just putting that up against the selector. And giving it a tap, tap, tap. The roll pin will fall out on the right hand side. Again, I'm guessing here we should be able to pull off that side of the selector. Is it going to let me? Yeah, very carefully do that. You don't want to scratch your receiver, as I scratch my receiver. Once we've done that, I believe we can, if you set your trigger like that, push from the right hand side and turn it to semi, and it should, there we go, drop out. Just twist it one way and the other, and then you'll be able to pull the selector out. So we remove the screw, we remove the selector. We're going to have to remove that pin. I'm not sure if the front pin is a fake or it's actually a pin. Trying to see here, it looks like it might be an actual pin. So it's got like a little C-clip on there. Fun. So we can remove the middle pin. Like that. Oh, it is a fake pin, thank God. That would have been a nightmare. And we can pull out the trigger pack, and there you have your lower. So this isn't the CNC one, this is the cast model. And we have the trigger pack. Very reminiscent of a normal MWS trigger pack. Obviously we've got the ambi bolt release. We've got a Z plate on there. Very thin Z plate, but it does feel like a chunky piece of steel. What sort of steel is it? It's just a standard carbon steel, I believe. You know, steel hammer, steel full auto sear, steel trigger, steel side components. Is the valve knocker steel? Yes, it is. So it's a full steel component trigger box. Now this is where things get interesting, boys and girls. Let's zoom you in. I'm going to have to try and do my best to keep this in frame. So if I do go out of frame, don't roast me too much. I'm trying my best. So I'm going to flip it over. We've got 3 screws. There's normally a bar that sits here, and it goes up to a secondary like semi-sear. So with the semi-auto, you have a sear on the front of the trigger, and you have a sear at the back, which sits on the hammer, which is the normal Marui design. Now you do have holes for adjustment screws, but the adjustment grub screw isn't in there. I presume that's in the box. And this is going to be a 2.5mm Allen key. We remove these 3 screws from the housing, and then just like the backwards G&G gearboxes, what you're going to have to do is take the screws out. Short one is in the front, and then we're going to have to flip it round, and we should be able to part this. Might have to use a little bit of leverage. Don't think there's anything else holding it on. I think it is coming apart. There we go. It's been a bugger. It's been a bugger. Did I get all the screws? I think I got all the screws, didn't I? Yeah. It's just tight like a tiger. There we go. Be careful of that little pin there, because that sits in that little recess. Now, on this side of the trigger box, you've basically got your detent and spring for your selector, and then you've got this buffer system which works with the Z plate. So what this does is it cushions the forward travel of the Z plate and of the bolt, and transfers that energy into the spring system just below. So here we have the full auto sear. Now usually in an MWS trigger box you have another sear that sits behind this, and they both have a spring. They've decided to not include that on this. I don't think it's needed. However, you know, we'll soon tell. That could be where I was going wrong with fitting all the GM parts, maybe. Maybe you don't need that part, and they've come to the conclusion that you don't need that part. This is where it could all go wrong. So we've got your trigger, got your disconnector. I can never remember what that thing is. It does something with a hammer. Can't quite remember. We've got the little spring clip for the body pin. You've got your valve knocker here, and you've got your hammer. Now I'm going to regret doing this because it can be a bit of a pain to put back together. But if we flip the GM hammer over, you're going to see something funky going on. So you have a little grub screw. Can you see that here? Yeah, you've got a little grub screw here. And what happens with that little grub screw is it's got little teeth on it. So let's unwind this out. So it's got little teeth, as you see there, on the grub screw. And what that allows the spring to do is it allows the spring to sit in these little channels, and I imagine stop this winding in or out. And what this is this is a tensioner for the spring, the hammer spring. So as you wind this in, you can apply gradually more pressure on the hammer spring to give you perhaps a little bit of boost in power. And the little detents mean that the spring will sit in that little detent in the grub screw, like so. I don't know if you can see that. And stop the spring moving. It'll also stop the grub screw working its way loose. And this is where we embrace the suck. I'm not going to pull the valve knocker out because it's a very simple part. And this is, you kind of have to load it up on an angle to get the hammer on like that, and then we can push this spring down like that. You might not be able to see this while I do it, and we're basically just pushing that spring to sit in that little detent there. Make sure it's flush, make sure it moves nice and freely. It's a nice steel hammer. I could never get the steel GM hammer to work with the trigger set that I bought, but here we are. That one seems to work fine. Maybe with the GM hammer I'll try taking out that semi-sear and see if that fixes the issue, but that is a job for another day. So let's get this set back into position. This is where it's going to be a bit of a bugger. It's going to want to jump out. So while that's held there, I'm going to put the full auto sear back in. I hope you guys appreciate this. And are you in? There we go. Is it in yet? Right. We're going to have to cross our fingers and toes, try and get these components to sit in place like that. Hey, take your little wire, whatever the hell this part's called, I really can't remember. Place it in that little channel. If it doesn't want to stay in like that, bit of grease in there to hold it in place. Should make it tacky enough where it stays in. While that's doing that, we're going to press the casing into place, making sure nothing's out of place. So reset, well, cocked, reset, fire. That's how we know it's working. We take this, we give it the old switcheroo, the old reverse Uno card. Get that bit of fluff off the screw. I'm not doing a weird bird call there. We take these screws, we're going to whack them back in before the whole thing decides to throw itself across the room, as it normally does when I'm trying to film stuff. That stuff never happens when I'm on my own and I'm just doing stuff. It always goes to plan. As soon as the camera goes on, ping, spring and detent go swinging across the room. And this is a room that's just full of stuff everywhere, so you're never going to find it. Or if you do, it's very, very lucky indeed. I believe this will be quite a reliable trigger box. I'm hoping anyway. I think I've put those screws in the wrong holes because that one's sticking out. Maybe they were different lengths. Oh no. Right, let's get that back out. Yeah, so there's 3 different lengths. Shortest, mid-length, long length. Whack that back in. Yes, I think on the development, on the GunsModify side, they've just decided they don't need these extra components and they've just tried to simplify the trigger box. Set plate will now go in. Bolt release. Can we get this spring in there? You're going to want to play ball. Sorry, I'm out of frame, just noticed. Want that. Get in the hole, spring. So you want to get that spring pivoted down into that hole like that and then wrap it round. Just be thankful that this trigger box is super easy to pull out of the lower, unlike a standard MWS, which if any of you out there have done that, you know how difficult it is to get that thing out of the receiver. Why they did it, I really don't know. Right. I have been playing around with the Toxicant trigger pack. I'll be doing another video on that because there is an issue. They've got an issue with their trigger packs and lowers, and basically they you need to shim them because as you tighten it down, it binds the selector up. It basically pulls it too far down. So with the Toxicant trigger packs, even if you've got the standard one with the brand new gun, take it out, put a shim underneath the trigger box and then screw through it and it'll be nice and silky smooth. Why they don't do that from the factory, I don't know. Body pin. right to left, like that. Selector, this is where it can get a little bit tricky. So what you need to do, zoom you in here, as you're pushing the selector through, you've got to clear this part of the trigger, so the disconnector. Once you pass that, you need to get past the detent, which on this selector it's going to be a little bit weird because it's a little bit different compared to a standard selector. So what I tend to do is just try and rotate it in. I don't think it's getting caught up on the detent just yet. Doesn't want to go in. I think we're on the detent now, just went round the world with it. There we go. So what I did to get it onto the detent is I just pushed it in to a point where it won't go anymore, spun it clockwise all the way around, then clicked into the next step, and then you push that detent in and you'll be able to push it into place. Put that side of the selector on, we'll get the little roll pin or the split pin or whatever you call these bloody parts. I can never remember the names for these things. I'm going to tap this pin back in. Like that, quick test. You can't put it on safe unless it's cocked, just to keep that in mind. Mag release in from the left side, put the spring on the mag release button. You want that textured surface pointing up. So what you do is you start to thread it on from this side, screw it in till you can't go no more. You don't want to go too far and scratch your receiver, like that. Then you're going to push and pull, and you basically, as you're turning it, you're pulling it up and getting it over the features of the, so you see how it stops there on the receiver? I'm going to pull it and I'm going to twist. And just do it in like half turns. Pull, twist to clear the bolt release, pull, twist. And you want it so either the thread is flush or just below. I might get away with one more on this one. Let's give it a old college try. Yep, got away with it, so it's nice and flush. There we go. Buffer spring, plastic buffer, pop your pins out, get your upper, put it on your lower, smack it down. I'm being funny with that, don't actually smack it down. Let's give it a quick function check. This is the version 3 PMag. What would you know? I don't know whether that's luck of the Irish or the fact that we've took it apart and greased it. Now it's not gassing everywhere, so it could be as simple as that piston cup that was really dry. It does always, you know, benefit you to just check these things if you're competent to do so. If you're not competent to do so and you don't feel comfortable taking these things apart, I say find yourself an airsoft tech. You know, say that in quotes because everyone calls themselves a tech these days. Find yourself a reliable tech, someone that specialises in the platform. Now, if you, like what I'm going to say here is, like, people ask me to work on platforms all the time. If it's not a platform that I either specialise in or work on a lot, I won't do it, because there's people out there that either specialise in that platform, or, you know, if they can't and I can't get it in, you're just going to have to find someone. So I'm an advantageous position now where I can pick and choose what I bring in, because I have very limited time only. And I think you need to work on what you're passionate about. I do have a 2.0 adapter here. Let's quickly give that a go. I don't think it's going to work, but it will work, but it's tight. So I think what the problem is with the version 3P mags is the lips are just too tight to push the BB past them. Oh man, it's getting naughty, this thing is. So there's part 2. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope it helps you. One thing I will say to check is check your buffer castle nut, because mine is loose. I just noticed that, or handling it, so I'll have to tighten that up. Make sure you use the correct tools, because the last thing you want to do is scratch the hell out of it. Thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Any questions, put them down in the comments below. If you haven't already, there's a link in the description to join the Jaeger Precision Discord. We have a very vast growing community. I think the last time I looked, it's well over 700 people in there. People are talking about GBB, AEG stuff all the time. We're in the voice channels all the time as well, so you can pop in and say hello. Just be respectful, be polite. Try not to talk over people, because some people do that. Say your piece, give a pause, let people get their points across, and we're all going to be having a good time. So, as always, from me and Bench, we'll see you in the next one.